Namaskar. Good evening. Professor Mani, welcoming you on behalf of the Bombay Management Association to this very special celebration of the National Management Day. This is a concept pioneered by the All India Management Association, and all of us who are under the umbrella of the All India Management Association do celebrate this day mainly to commemorate various aspects of management development and leadership. This morning, we had a complete webinar hosted by the All India Management Association, which many of us attended. And now is the time for us at Bombay Management Association to host a special Saturday special. As you are already aware, this is another momentous occasion for BMA because we are launching the BMA KS Basu Memorial Lecture Series today. And this is something we owe to Dr. K.S. Basu, being the second president of the Bombay Management Association. And of course, he was more popularly known as the founder director of the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies. A gentleman par excellence who has inspired so many people across the world who remember him very fondly even today at different given points in time. BMA is honored to partner with this wonderful association, that is the KS Basu Memorial Trust. And I appreciate the efforts of Sri Ernest Fernandez, our past president of BMA, in making this happen. And I welcome Professor Ravi Dingra, who is the managing trustee of the KS Basu Memorial Trust. Thank you, Ajay Piramal ji. It is indeed our honor and privilege that you will be delivering the first annual memorial lecture that is being organized by BMA and the Dr. K.S. Basu Memorial Trust. At this point in time, I'd like to welcome all our past presidents, my colleagues from IMA, as well as the Bombay Management Association. And I'd now request our past president and a mentor to all of us in Bombay Management Association, Sri Sailesh Haribhakti ji, to please say a few words on this occasion and set the ball rolling for this annual memorial lecture series. Over to you, Sailesh Bhai.
Thank you, Professor Mani. Let me begin by very specially welcoming Ajay Piramal in our midst. I must share with all the past presidents and all the participants that the person who introduced me to BMA was Ajay Piramal. He was extremely close to Dr. Basu, as many of us know. And I remember, Ajay, I don't know whether you recollect, but it was at a very short meeting that we had in the Bombay Gymkhana that you introduced me and requested me to join BMA. And that was my first introduction. As all of us know, Ajay has become a legend in a lifetime. He has shown what entrepreneurship, what extraordinary commitment to business and to society can do. He truly represents the best-in-class entrepreneurial spirit that India is becoming more and more famous for. But now, today is the occasion really to remember the extraordinary contribution that all of us have received from Dr. K.S. Basu. I remember the few occasions on which we had the good fortune to listen to him. He gave us very deep, lasting, and memorable lessons in management. And I'm looking forward today to a journey where Ajay will talk to us about his experiences in management. And we know that very recently, just about day before yesterday, the Reserve Bank of India has handed over a very large enterprise in his very competent hands. We're very proud of you, Ajay, and we are all looking forward to listening to your wonderful address this evening. With that, may I hand it back to Professor Mani to take this event forward. Professor Mani.
Thank you, Sailesh Bhai, for setting the right tone for this very, very enriching evening that we are looking forward to. I will, of course, have the honor and privilege to introduce someone who perhaps is one of India's best known industrialists and philanthropists, the chairman of Piramal Group, Sri Ajay Piramal. As was mentioned somewhere earlier, an alumnus of the JBIMS, Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, who subsequently also completed his management studies from Harvard. He's one of those who's always respected as an entrepreneur who believes in responsible entrepreneurship. Do well, do good is the philosophy that he follows in life. And so much so that besides his business, which is spread over 30 countries, touching over 100 markets, Piramal Foundation is an organization which is respected to a great extent because of the wonderful work they do across 25 states. And as we speak today, they have touched the lives of over 100 million people in India, making a positive impact to their lives and careers. Mr. Piramal is very, very closely attached to the education world, being on the advisory boards of Harvard Business School, also part of the advisory board at the CEO Forum and in UK, has been awarded by so many organizations, including the All India Management Association, Forbes, and so on. In fact, I'm tempted to call him Dr. Ajay Piramal because he has two honorary PhDs to his credit, one from IIT Indore in sciences and one from Amity in management. In fact, Sailesh Bhai just mentioned it in passing, but the Piramal Group has got a new baby in its fold, and that is Diwan Housing Finance Limited, which is popularly known as DHFL. Since it was announced 2 days ago, as Sailesh Bhai said, I'm taking the liberty of telling this to people who may have missed this by oversight. Thank you so much, Ajay ji. It is our honor and delight. And may I request you to please deliver the first BMA KS Basu Memorial Leadership Lecture. Over to you, sir.
Namaskar. The BMA President, Professor Mani, my good friend and past President of BMA, Mr. Sailesh Haribhakti, Professor Ravi Dhingra, the other past presidents of BMA, and my dear friends. I'm indeed honored to be here today to speak on what is the first Dr. K.S. Basu Memorial Lecture. I just want to acknowledge the work that Ravi and his sister, Dr. Dhingra, have been doing to share with us the memory of Dr. Basu. They have been working on it over several years and have done more than what any other family would do. So thank you, Ravi, for all that you're doing, and to Mrs. Dhingra. Sailesh has been very generous in his comments, but let me tell you that one of the good things that I may have done is to introduce him to BMA because he was such a successful president over there. I'm going to begin today my talk on Dr. Basu, reminding of an incident that happened when I was at Bajaj. I studied at the MMS course from 1975 to 77. And I think it was in 75 where there was a meeting, there was a conference organized. And if I'm not mistaken, it was by BMA itself, where Mr. Rahul Bajaj and Dr. Basu were speaking. And it was more like a debate, if I can say that. Rahul Bajaj, as you know, after whose family the Bajaj Institute has been named, and who was also a MBA from the Harvard Business School. And that's the time when they got into a bit of a argument, if I can say, during that podium, because Rahul was speaking a lot about the the benefits of education at Harvard and how Bajaj ought to have done something like that as well. And that's when Dr. Basu put up a very strong defense about the way he had approached Bajaj. and how he had started JBIMS and what the success rate was. So with that as a background, it's worth remembering what Dr. Basu's contribution in starting what was then the most premier institute of the country was. Bajaj Institute, or JBIMS, was first a part of the University of Mumbai. To start a management program in the early 60s was quite a challenge. And to deal with the Mumbai University, or the Bombay University as it was then known, is one of the most difficult things to do. I can tell you from personal experience, a few years ago, some of us, quite very, let's say, good alumni of the institute wanted to get autonomy, because that's what the government was. The view of the government was that to grant autonomy. And we spent so much of time with the vice chancellor and the university. And frankly, there was no autonomy, and it still remains where it was. It was a, let me say, futile exercise for us. But in such an environment for Dr. Basu, he created many firsts. First of all, at that time, there were only two institutes of management. The Indian Institute of IIM in Ahmedabad, which had a tie-up with Harvard, and the IIM at Calcutta, which had a tie-up with MIT. But Dr. Basu said, let us do what is our own Indian university, because this is where the issues are of India. So we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat today. Dr. Basu had thought about it in the 60s, that we needed to have an institute which was based on Indian case studies, Indian values. So that was a big, courageous decision. And as I said, many people were critical of it. Okay, how can this succeed? Including the discussion that Rahul Bajaj himself had. Besides that, Dr. Basu did many other things. This was the only management institute where there was no campus, because it was right in the heart of the city. As you know, Bajaj is in Churchgate. Again, he converted this as a handicap, which many thought, into really an opportunity, because it was at the heart of the city where the best minds were there, the most successful practitioners were there. And therefore, he said that this will attract best faculty, where again, he took a different stance. He said that I will get few full-time faculty, and because there was not that much of faculty at that time in India who had learned management, but I'll get practitioners of management. So CEOs of some of the best companies would come and teach here. Another thing is worth noting that for Dr. Basu, a big exception was made by the university. Dr. Basu is not a PhD in management or in any other studies. He was a medical doctor, but yet he was made the director of a management institute. Besides the faculty, we also had a very different syllabus, different from what any of the IIMs did. IIM Ahmedabad was, their studies were based on the case study method, but Dr. Basu decided that I will have a mix of teaching practitioners as well as of theory. So it was a very different from what was done in the IIMs. Even the selection of students, can you imagine in a university setting, students were not selected on the basis of just some entrance exam or marks. We had group discussions, we had individual interviews, and to some extent marks as well. And a mixture of students. Today, if I go to an IIM, and I've seen many of them, it's usually somebody from an engineering degree, an IIT or something would get first preference. But here we had a mix of students from the arts, students from commerce, from engineering, across the board, across the whole country. So again, that was different. And finally, if you see, The proof of the pudding is in the eating. As they say that the JBIMS was a CEO factory. There have been more CEOs depending on the number of students as a percentage from Bajaj than there were from any of the IIMs. So that was Dr. Basu's contribution, not only to the city, but in terms of the management education for this country. It gave a new way of looking at management, which was totally indigenous. But Dr. Basu has had many other firsts in his career. Though he was a medical doctor, he rose to become the HR head of Hindustan Lever. He became the vice chairman of Hindustan Lever, and at the peak of his career, decided to do something for the country in terms of management education when he left as vice chairman of Hindustan Lever to start Bajaj. In fact, we are all everybody looks upon the students, the management training program of Hindustan Lever as one of the most successful programs. And all the CEOs of Lever have come from that program. I can say that it was Dr. Basu who started that program. And this is where it's continued over so many decades. I have to give you another interesting story, which is personal to me as well. Dr. Basu was the first person who decided to actually start a training institute for Hindustan Lever in Bombay. So he started a residential training program. And for that, he bought a bungalow at Worli Sea Face called Gulita. And at that time, I must say that there was a lot of, let's say, criticism within the Lever family and outside that why are you investing so much in acquiring a residential place to become a training center? But that has been one of the most successful parts of the Lever training program. And what's more interesting is that a few years ago, when Lever was selling off the Gulita property at Worli Sea Face, is what we have now made that into our house. So again, a close connection with Dr. Basu. Dr. Basu and I graduated in 77. And a little later than that, we started also, besides to have a relationship as a consulting. He was like a guide and mentor to me and to our business. I need to just say that I graduated in 77, but in 79, my father, who was the chairman of our business, suddenly passed away. And a few years later, my elder brother, who was also a graduate of the Bajaj Institute, Ajay Piramal, also passed away at a very young age. So therefore, in 1984, when I was 29 years old, I had to run a whole business on my own. That was the time, again, when Dr. Basu stood by me, advised me, and almost was like a father figure to me, not only in terms of business, but amongst many other things that he would guide. And not only me, but my family, my wife, Swati, and all of us gained a lot from his guidance. We traveled a lot to many parts of the world to do collaborations, joint ventures, and to look at what could be done for the future of the group. And therefore, that was a very close association that we had with Dr. Basu and Dr. Dhingra, who would help us in understanding the markets and doing a lot of market research. I tried to also put in some of the lessons, many of them learned by Dr. Basu, and some of them over time that I've learned. And I thought I will share this with you because this is the National Management Day, and for what Dr. Basu taught me and what I learned. So first thing, when I look at Dr. Basu's life and what has stood with me is that for leadership, you have to take the path less traveled. Whether it was whether it was from becoming a medical doctor to doing HR and to rising as the vice chairman of Hindustan Lever, whether it was starting the first institute for management, which was indigenous in the city of Mumbai, leaving a successful career. These are all courageous steps that he had taken. And that's what has said that it's the path less traveled is the one which you can make, you can be successful. We've tried to follow that as well. And as we were traditionally a textile business, when we moved into pharmaceuticals, it was the path less traveled. So this is something that I have learned from him. Another thing that is very important and I've learned, and I was fortunate to be with Dr. Basu right in my formative years, is the association one should keep with good people, or the sangat, as we can call it in Hindi, is what is so important. People who are not only very well qualified, very successful, but who have a value-based life. I think that is perhaps one of the most important lessons that I have learned, because these are the people who can tell us to travel, that if we are going wrong, to correct us. And whether it is a consultant, whether it's an advisor, or whether it's a friend, let's have people who are there to tell you whether it is right or wrong, and who do it only because they have your good at heart. I've been fortunate that I've had these people like Dr. Basu, who began in my early days of my career, which has helped. And I've continued that right throughout till now. So I would suggest that let's have people, good people associated with us. During the pandemic, one of the things that I want to relate a story, an example which may be relevant in a pandemic. When we all take a flight, you will find that when you are sitting in the plane, the takeoff is not in your control. The flight, whilst it's going, is not in your control, neither is the landing. But what is in your control is what happens, what you do during the flight. And let's take the example, and all of us must have experienced this sometime or the other, that there are certain flights where there's a lot of turbulence. And it's worth noting and observing the people who are, how they are reacting to the turbulence. There are some people who are really very, very worried. Some of them are going on their malas and praying to God. Others are just, sometimes panicking, sometimes just closing their eyes and whatever. Whilst there are some others who are just relaxing, enjoying themselves, or having a drink or having dinner or whatever it is. In the same way, life is like that. We cannot, and especially during the pandemic, you cannot control what's happening outside. The pandemic affects each one of us. All of us are affected in some way or the other. But how we deal with it is like the person of flight. Are we going to be panicking? Are we going to be worried and not thinking of anything? Or are we going to enjoy the ride, read a book, whatever it is, the same way it is in the pandemic? Let's take that example and say that how we can manage ourselves. Let's be the person on the flight who is going to be still enjoying himself in spite of whatever is happening around. And which leads me to the other learning that I have learned, so the learning from this is that we have to be equanimous. In everyone's life, there will be good times, there will be bad. I don't know anybody who's had only a career which is exceptionally good and without any challenges in their life, either through the career or personally. There will always be challenges. How do we deal with it is one of the lessons that I have also learned. Which also brings me to the next lesson I want to talk about, is that every time you have a challenge, actually another door is there of opportunity. Look at what even Dr. Basu did. There was a challenge in his career as a doctor, and he went on to become the head of, he became the vice chairman of Hindustan Lever. Similarly, I think both Sailesh as well as Professor Mani, you spoke about the DHFL. In fact, I think during this period, there was a challenge that, okay, businesses were going through a difficult time. But again, it was in these where, because it's difficult times, some people were suffering more than what others were. And DHFL was suffering. It was a sick company. It was referred to the bankruptcy court. And that's when it became an opportunity for us. So similarly, all of us, if we are positive, if we don't only think about what is the bad thing, think there will be many, many opportunities. We have to see, we have to grab opportunities. So that is my one other lesson that I have learned, is that always there are challenges, but there will be opportunities. I think I'm talking a lot, but I'm going to share with you one of my other important learnings has been, what is the deep driving desire? There is a quotation, which is my favorite quotation from the Upanishads, which I want to share with you. It says, "You are what your deep driving desire is. As is your desire, so is your will. As is your will, so is your deed. And as is your deed, so is your destiny." I'm just going to just repeat the key words. So first, you need a deep driving desire to determine your destiny. So first is the deep driving desire. Once you have that deep driving desire, then you will it. You're determined that you will do it. And you convert, so desire, and then next is will. The will is converted into deed, into action, and that action is your destiny. So this is a really important learning that I have experienced myself, that it is not, destiny is not made by what's written in your horoscope, but it is our desire that can get us the destiny. And I've seen this many times. I'm going to just give you one example. We entered into pharmaceuticals in 1988 and acquired what was then Nicholas Piramal, which was number 48th in the pharmaceutical companies in India. At that time, I was young and enthusiastic, and therefore at the board made one of our early meetings, said that we are 48 today, but we will get into the top 5. We want to get into the top 5 by 2000. Everybody thought it was a joke, and people didn't believe it. But I think our management team, started believing that, yes, let's try for it. What is wrong? And therefore, it was not, I think it was our effort, but probably the universe also conspired to see that we did become number 5 in 2000. So again, and I have many other examples like this I have personally seen in my own life and seen it with others. So it's a very important lesson that I thought I should share about the deep driving desire. I want to just mention about integrity is another thing, which are the value of integrity. What is integrity? Integrity is that what you think, you say, and what you say, you do. And it is this integrity which has helped us through many challenges. Not only that, actually, I have believed that if people believe you, if you have a reputation of integrity, at some times it may be costly, but over time, it is a very, very, I could say even it adds economic value. So integrity means that you can get significant advantages in your business and in your career as well. So that is one of the other things that I would like to say is another lesson that I would like to share with you. Finally, I would say is the concept of trusteeship, where we look at ourselves as trustees in whatever position we may be in our management, in business, trustees for our employees, trustees for our customers, trustees for our shareholders, and trustees for society, and do everything possible in a balanced manner to see that all these constituents are fairly treated and appropriately handled. Therefore, I just want to end by just summarizing some of my leadership lessons that I have got. First, as I said, is the path less traveled. The second lesson that I have learned is about the association of good people. The third would be on equanimity during good times and bad times. The fourth is that challenges are another, that if you have challenges, you have other doors opening for opportunities. The fifth is on the deep driving desire. The sixth is on integrity. And the seventh is on trusteeship. I think I have spoken a lot, but I want to just thank you all for listening to this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shri Ajay Piramal. It was very, very inspiring to listen to you. And every word you mentioned had so much of depth of expression that all of us are feeling very, very inspired. May I request Sailesh Bhai to make a few observations. In the meantime, I'd like to specially acknowledge that we have some very senior people here with us this evening. I'd like to welcome Shri Krishan Kalraji, former president of the All India Management Association. Also, all the way from Chennai, Dr. Tillai Valal, who incidentally is the managing director of a very leading hospital chain called the Venkateshwara Multi-Speciality Hospitals. Such are some of our special guests this evening, and thank you so much for gracing the occasion. Sailesh Bhai, a few comments from you, please.
Thank you, Professor Mani. Ajay, thanks for giving us the 7 habits of a successful entrepreneur. It was just marvelous to listen to you rattle off all of those 7 extraordinary insights that you had to share with us. I would like to raise with you 2 or 3 issues. The big challenge in today's world seems to be the rapid pace of change, the rapid pace of digitalization, the idea that we have already overconsumed our world, and therefore we need to get back to the path of what is now known as ESG. And there's also a huge pressure from the young generation to join organizations which have a soul. That is exemplified by some of the things that you said, the integrity, the challenge, the conversion of challenges to opportunities. All of that is part of what the young generation is really looking up to and looking forward to. So how do you encompass all of these external changes and bring them to bear on making your enterprises, 1, successful, and 2, very attractive to the people that you have drawn to yourself?
So, Sailesh, very, very relevant question that you've raised. First of all, as far as ESG is concerned, let me say that when I talked about the concept of trusteeship, I meant that you have to give back to society around you as much. We have been, besides what we are doing in our plants, which is of course to ensure that genuinely there is the environment is being looked after, whether it is in terms, and being in the pharmaceutical sector, there's a lot of affluent and so on. But it's not only the law that we follow, but we follow it in spirit as well. That's what we try to do everywhere across. But secondly, I just want to, I think Professor Mani in his uh, opening talked about what our foundation is doing. And I can share a little bit about that is because we believe that actually, if you see it, if we don't do this, if you see today, and especially over the last 2 decades, all over the world, the gap between the haves or the really elite and the not so well off is just increasing. I mean, you have companies which have $1 trillion market capitalization. Now, this is bigger than most countries of the world. You'll be in the top few countries in the world. So therefore, the gap is only increasing. And if we don't manage this, I think we are in for a lot of trouble, not only from the environment, even society-wise. So we have been working quite closely, if I may say, to look at in 3 big areas: health, education, and drinking water. The Prime Minister has identified 112 districts in India, which are called the aspirational districts. These are the districts which are the most backward in all the human development indices, whether it is infant mortality, maternal mortality, in terms of education, nutrition, say, and we are behind. And we are worse than many of the least developed countries. So this is the area that you have to work. And I can say that we have been working in 25 of these districts with about 750 of our own people on the ground looking at education. How do we improve school learning levels? How do you improve healthcare? And actually, if I can say, that we are working in 22 states in other areas. We have about 4,000 people working in our foundation on a daily basis, trying to improve healthcare, trying to improve education, and only in government schools or only in government institutions, and providing clean drinking water in the Jal Jeevan mission. So that is, I feel, important for us as a society. If we don't do this, I don't think the way the system is working is going to continue for long.
So well said, Ajay. I think it's all about clean tech, clean water, clean air. And I think finally the world is coming around to the view that we are all in this together. We need to work together to make sure that we can create a better world. Thank you very much for those very inspiring thoughts on how we need to take care of society. It's not just the inequity you talked about, but also diversity, fairness, fair treatment, making sure that universal basic service at a minimum level, education, health, making sure that water is available, people have a roof over their head. All of these have become so critical, particularly in our country, and because of the divergence in income that technology and everything else is causing, as you rightly put, it becomes the responsibility of people who can do it to do the best and the most they can. Thank you. That was very, very
I'm
inspiring.
going to add one more thing, Sailesh, and you talked about the youth, that youth are very interested. So I should have added this. We have another program, which we call the Gandhi Fellowship, where every year we are recruiting about 400 to 500 young people who've done their graduation, or some of them their post-graduation, and ask them to work for 2 years for the country under our sort of umbrella. And they are 24/7 with us, and they're working in all these remote areas and the challenges of all over the country through rural India. And you'll be very happy to know that this is a program where we take 500 people, but these are about maybe 8 to 10,000 kids apply for it. And these are from all the best institutes. So we have the IIMs, the IITs, and all the top colleges, people coming. So there is a lot of, and it's a very hard life. We don't give them much of a stipend and we train them. But the good news is that young people are willing to give back to the country, to society, and that is heartening.
Absolutely. So nice that you pointed that out because they are our future. Professor Mani,
Ajay ji,
back to you.
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sailesh bhai. Ajay ji, I have a couple of questions if you will permit me to read them out to you, please.
Yeah.
All right. One of the first interesting questions pertains to the fact that when we talk about leadership in organizations, and when you're talking about corporate organizations in different spheres, in different industry segments, the biggest challenge is succession planning. How do you ensure that this is something that you take care of in your group? If you can share some of your insights.
So succession planning is very, very important. First of all, in a group which is, I believe, professionally managed like ours, but we still have a family which has a significant shareholding. So the next generation of the family themselves should be well qualified. They have to be, and they must appreciate what it is to run a successful business. So I have to say that in my family also we have done that. So I have two children, and both of them have graduated, one from Stanford, the other from Harvard, and both have been seeing business through many, many lenses. And I realize the value of professional management and realize the value of where a family can play a role. And therefore, they have done it. Actually, I'm very happy. If you see, in my family, we are 6 of us, in the sense of my kids, my wife, Swati, and my kids' spouses. And out of them, 3 of them have graduated from Harvard and the other 3 from Stanford. So it's not a bad ratio.
Wonderful.
And then across the teams, also people, we try and see at various levels that how we can get competent people, give them responsibility early enough to see that there will be options for us when people retire.
All right, that's very, very interesting. So would you also throw some light on what would be the secrets of your success as a leader?
Actually, I said what I don't know whether successful or not, but my secrets, which I follow, is what I spoke about. And there was one thing maybe I should have spoken, which I think is very important. I didn't leave. I thought I wanted to be a bit brief. One is that any leader has to have humility. The value of humility sometimes is forgotten, and especially I see because all this, the media and the press and the TV and all. When you are successful, they want to make a big noise about it, and sometimes you forget. But humility is important. And why is humility important? Because only if you're humble do you have an open mind. Are you willing to listen to other people's inputs, their advice, their comments? I think it's so important. And people like humble people, whether it's in the organization, your colleagues, your people who are reporting to you, your seniors, everybody likes humility. So I think humility is one very important thing, which I also try and practice to the extent possible. And as always, I say that importance for success is to have faith in a higher power. At least in my life, I've seen that that has worked a lot, because all of us go through challenging times. I have not, as I said that before. So if you have faith, I think this too will pass, is how I look at it.
Wonderful. So humility and the power of faith is well explained. Could you add on and tell us, how do you cope with stress?
So actually, stress, as I said, then I gave the example of the plane. When you are in a flight, this too will pass, and you have to do. By stress, there's nothing positive that you can do. There's no point worrying about what is happening in the future. I think you have to live in the present, not think about the past, not think what will happen in the future. If you live in the present and do everything possible in a crisis time, I think you will get out. Now let's take the example in the last year. I think all of us have had stress. But I can tell you that we have done more, let's say, more big transactions in this 1 year than we would have done at any other time in my career, which is now quite a lot of more than 40 years. So again, I think it is by just stressing and sitting back, it doesn't help in any way. The only way to get out of the stress is for us to do something which is positive and constructive. And remember that this too will pass. And that is the difference between a person who will succeed and will not.
All right, sir. I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Pramod Solanki. He's a veteran HR professional with plenty of experience in corporate and now is into consulting, a PhD himself in organization behavior. Over to you, Pramod.
Thank you, Professor Mani, for those kind words, and good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
I am, besides this inspiring lecture, I am so impressed with this strong sense of identification and that sense of gratitude that you carry about the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute, not very common these days. I have also had a short association of about 5 years with the Institute, and during Silver Jubilee celebrations, had an occasion to listen to you there briefly, where you took some of the people to the task with your observations in terms of, which again showed how strongly you feel about the Institute. I have a purely HR question. We in HR strongly believe that if an organization can have a fully engaged workforce, it can be a very significant, competitive advantage for the organization. I am aware of you having sponsored and led a fairly, serious intervention around raising the engagement levels in your pharma sector. And actually one of my friends by the name Prashant Srivastava, worked on this. So while we HR people have very strong convictions about the value it creates, etc., as a distinguished business leader, I'm keen to hear what do you think about this factor playing a significant role in the value creation as well as, how employees see that organization.
So as you know, we have been doing these engagement surveys for now many years across our entire group. And I found that it's a very useful tool for getting engagement because you come to hear about what the employees really feel. And this is again a tool which is, it is anonymous, so the answers are pretty frank. And we found that they've given us a good insight. We've been able to understand what people have been doing. We've been making changes where we feel that where there are shortcomings, building on what are our strengths. But I just want to add one thing, that it is not the only tool. Sure. If you find that you're very highly engaged employees, does it mean that you will always remain successful and create value? I don't think so, because it's there. But also you have to sometimes get deeper into other things as well. Suppose let's take an example where you're really paying people really high incentives in particular years because you've done well. They may be very engaged then. But if you find that the other values are not there, then there is a challenge which can come, and then the engagement will suddenly fall. So I think engagement is important. It's actually critical. If you have low engagement, there's no chance of success. But engagement is not the only criteria, or it's not the only indication that you will necessarily succeed. You have to also do more than that. That's what I would say. So I've had examples in our own businesses where engagement levels have been very good and consistently high, and we've consistently done very well. And in fact, sometimes we may not have done well also because it's not the markets remain, but still we have come out of challenges. But there are other times when we have done very well, engagement levels are high, but when we've not looked at other things, they have also, performance has gone down. So it's a mixed answer, if I can say.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So the next question pertains to the work that you're doing with Piramal Foundation. A lot of work happens in rural India, what we call Bharat. versus India, as one is talking about. What have been your experiences on Skill India as far as various such initiatives in rural India go?
So the way our foundation works is on a few principles. First of all is that in our foundation, we believe that the challenges that India has, and especially rural India has, you need to have innovative solutions, because in spite of our independence for 70 years, there are still many challenges left. I've seen that many people who are working in rural India or many of the NGOs, they just take what's worked in the US or worked in some other country and try to bring it. That doesn't work in India because we have our own challenges. India is also not one country. We have many, many different, the challenges which are there in the Northeast are very different from what there could be in South, tribal region in the South. So innovation we have found is very important. That's what we are doing in each of our activities, which I spoke about. The second thing we've seen is that you have to do things in India on scale. You cannot, otherwise it can't move the needle. And to do things on scale, one has to work with government. So we are working on a scale on government. You talked about 100 million beneficiaries. That is only because we don't have the infrastructure. Nobody has this infrastructure to work with so many people unless you do it with government. And our experience, contrary to what many people say, is that with most of the people in government, they also want to work and to do something good. There could be some bad apples. I'm not saying all are good, but that's so in business and private sector as well. So if we work together with government, you will find that people are really committed to doing good things. So our experience has been that it has been a very positive experience, if I can say.
Okay, sir. I'm handing over to Sri Ashok Sharmaji, a very senior industry professional and a former president of our Bombay Management Association. Over to you, Sharmaji.
Dr. Mani, I think there are very many senior people present, and I would like them to speak. I would only like to endorse what Ajay has been saying, his nature of humility, etc. I have personally experience of that for several years that we work together in BMA and in some other organizations also. So what he is saying is a practical example of what we all do, and I think we'll be on a different platform altogether. I wish him all the best, and I'll make a comment sometime later, but currently please continue with your discussion.
How are you, Ashok? Long time.
Good, how are you?
Well? All well.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good old days and some flights together.
All right, it's now time for me to introduce briefly Professor Ravi Dhingra. Professor Ravi Dhingra is the managing trustee of the K.S. Basu Memorial Trust. And the K.S. Basu Memorial Trust has had a collaboration with the Bombay Management Association this year, where we are organizing conclaves on very, very contemporary topics. Last month, we had the BMA conclave on innovation. And just yesterday, we had the BMA conclave on ethics, both of which were very well attended and appreciated, with speakers as well as delegates from all over the world. Professor Ravi Dhingra is also an alumnus of the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, went on then to study at Wharton, and subsequently is now at Connecticut at the Sacred Heart University as an adjunct professor, besides having his own marketing consultancy. Thank you so much, Professor Ravi, for fostering this tie-up between BMA and the Dr. K.S. Basu Memorial Trust. And may I invite you to say a few words on this occasion on creating this K.S. Basu Memorial Lecture Leadership Series. Over to you, Professor Ravi Dhingra.
Thank you, Professor Mani, for your very kind words. And thank you, Mr. Ajay Piramal, for sharing some of your valuable insights, some of the challenges, as well as your leadership experiences. That was wonderful. It was very good fortitude that brought our two organizations, the Trust and the BMA, together earlier this year, to collaborate on these events. And I hope this collaboration continues for a long time. The trustees of the Dr. K.S. Basu Memorial Trust are delighted to support and partner with the BMA on this inaugural memorial lecture to celebrate and honor the memory and legacy of Dr. Kalyan Sundar Basu. And today's lecture is special for a couple of reasons. Having this memorial lecture under the auspices of the Bombay Management Association is special because, as many of you know, Dr. Basu was one of the co-founders of this august body and its second president from 1961 to 1965. He would have indeed been very proud and honored that an organization that he helped found 66 years ago is alive and well and flourishing and hosting this memorial lecture today. It was especially befitting that Mr. Ajay Piramal delivered the inaugural memorial lecture today to the memory of a man who over the years helped truly shape the lives of so many corporate executives, entrepreneurs, and industrialists. And as someone who had a very close relationship with Dr. Saab over so many years, in many ways, Mr. Piramal embodies the ethical values and principles that Dr. Basu lived by and instilled in all those he worked with. He expected nothing less than excellence. I know he was so proud of what you had accomplished so early in your career in the 80s and 90s, and he would have been even prouder today, not only of your business acumen and achievements, but especially your values of responsible entrepreneurship, a focus on doing well by doing good, and dedication to the work of your foundations in making a positive social impact on Indian society. On a personal note, if I may, the Dr. K.S. Basu Memorial Trust could not have become a reality without you. So thank you. The trust was formed to honor the memory and legacy of this exceptional man, Dr. Kalyan Sundar Basu, a practicing medical doctor, as Mr. Piramal alluded to earlier, in Lahore, Punjab. He moved to Bombay after partition and rose to become a visionary leader and an eminent educator who touched and inspired and mentored a whole generation of executives and industrialists in India who made their mark as CEOs, as entrepreneurs in India and around the world. He was an executive director on the board and vice chairman of Hindustan Lever before he became the founding director of the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management. I just want to echo what Mr. Piramal said earlier about Dr. Basu and the Bajaj Institute. Ahmedabad was the other two leading institutes at the time. IIM Ahmedabad and IIM Calcutta were set up with the collaboration of Harvard and MIT respectively. But Dr. Basu's vision of management education was a little bit different, to say the least. He wanted to create an institute that was uniquely Indian. He was a staunch advocate for a homegrown management model, contextualizing management concepts and practices in the Indian setting, reflecting Indian values and management style. He wanted to adapt and not just adopt Western management model and theories and practices. So much to everyone's surprise, he actually turned down the generous terms of the collaboration provided by Stanford University, choosing instead to build an Indian Management Education Institute from scratch. Remembering that this was the 60s, things were a little more challenging in those days, to say the least. This was days before liberalization. By the 70s, he had become an internationally recognized management educator and practitioner, and was invited and traveled extensively around the world to conduct lectures and management seminars. He was an early pioneer in good board governance before Indian corporations knew what governance actually meant, and professionalizing management of family-held industrial houses in the 70s and 80s. And those boards and chairmen who worked with him remember well the discipline he instilled and the excellence he demanded from all. Yesterday at the Ethics Conclave, I shared a little snippet or story. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share it again today for those who were not at the event yesterday. It was the late 70s. I was on a short trip, I think it was 78 or 79, and I was on a short trip to Bombay from Sydney, where I was, Australia, where I was posted in those days. And I had a lunch date with Dr. Basu at the Taj. He loved eating at the Shamiana. The food was right to his taste. On this particular day, he arrived a few minutes late, which was highly unusual, very uncharacteristic of Dr. Basu, because he was always very punctual. And as many of you know, who dealt with him, he was a stickler for time. And rather than his usual bubbly self and laughter, he seemed a little bit upset. So after we had ordered our meal, chatting with him, it finally came out that he had just come from a board meeting, and he had just learned that some government official was going to be paid a tidy sum of money to make some problems go away. I think it may have had to do with some import duty problems, or but he said he wanted to be no part of this baimani, as he called it, unprincipled action. And even though competitor had done the same, in his world, baimani was totally unacceptable. And he said, I offered my resignation if they went ahead and pursued this sort of action, because he says, India is never going to make progress if we keep repeating this again and again. It illustrates the principle and integrity of the man, as Mr. Piramal referred to earlier. The word ethics was not part of the common business lexicon then. And I personally never heard him use the word ethics, but I often heard him say, do the right thing, imandari se kaam karo. That was his way of ethics, ethical behavior, not just his message, but his actions on what we know today as ethics. His favorite phrase was, things are rarely black or white, and they're always shades of gray. And it is how you make decisions in those gray areas that define your character, your company's culture, and your ethics. It's how you make those difficult decisions. It's not about morals. It's not about the law. We all know what is right and wrong, but the ethical person, the principled person, is the one who makes the difficult decisions in those gray areas. I could go on. Mr. Piramal has articulated well the man, the values, the integrity, the principles, his empathy that defined who he was. It was a privilege to have known him. and be one of his many students who learn not just management concepts, but real and important life lessons from Dr. Basu. My fellow trustees and I thank you, Professor Mani, and your entire team for hosting this event and for your support. To Mr. Ajay Piramal for taking the time to share your experiences today, and to all of you attendees who took the time to be with us this evening. Without you, this would not have been a memorial lecture. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Dhingra. As much as you acknowledged us, we couldn't have had this event without you. So we look forward to more such meaningful interactions as we go on. Mr. Piramal, if you permit us, there are two more questions, and I would like to request you to please spare the time for that before we come to the end of this session. I'll hand over to Indrapal Singh Ji, who's our former president of BMA and a very senior industry veteran himself. Indrapal Ji, over to you. Sir, please unmute, sir.
Yep. Hello.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Piramal.
Yeah.
Before I ask my question, I have a request to make, since all of us who admire Dr. Basu and who have benefited from him in various ways, that can we think of bringing about some collected writings of Dr. Basu, because they are not readily available as far as I know. And maybe that volume could contain the stories and anecdotes that many of us would remember. And that would be a kind of a fitting tribute to, make available his wisdom to the coming generations. So that was the one suggestion I was very keen to make, because the other day I had a conversation with someone, and I was referring to a particular lecture or his article, and he said, oh, such things exist. I said, they do. So probably Dr. Dhingra, Miss Dhingra, Mr. Ravi Dhingra, maybe yourself and others who may have access to such papers of Dr. Basu, if they can be brought about as collected writings of Dr. Basu, it can be immensely useful. Just a suggestion. And the question to me, sir, is that in your lessons that you shared, I see a deeply running strand of Vedantic philosophy underneath, because we have heard about 70 odd senior people in last few months through the ages of Professor Mani, and I rarely imagine someone has referred to Upanishads, in the sense you have done. And Upanishads, as we all know, are a stage beyond the Bhagavad Gita, which is commonly referred to. So how does this thoughts of Vedantic philosophy and the modern management that we learn from Western world, they coexist in your mind space, and how do they help you take, I think, mostly correct decisions as you have progressed in your life so far?
So you made a very interesting and correct observation, Mr. IP, saying that it's true. So I'm fortunate that for last several decades that I have had some Swamijis, different Swamijis coming to teach me, whether it's the Gita, whether it's the other, our scriptures that we learn, and it continues on a weekly basis. So that's the foundation, if I may say so. But actually, if you look at it in some ways, it helps us in life. I mean, in every which way. Actually, what I spoke about is there in every book. So when I said about equanimity, that's there in all our scriptures, whether it's the Upanishads, it's in the Gita several times. Whether I spoke about, in terms of the concept of trusteeship, it's over there. When I talked about Sangat, so everything is there, and it's all as relevant to management as anything else. And humility is so important. Actually, everything I've said has been said before, so it's nothing original of mine. It's all that has been there in the scriptures. It's available for all of us. I'm fortunate and grateful that I've got an exposure to it. And I did not want to push that, but people, if it's worth looking at
Thank
and
you, sir.
understanding.
Thank you. Thank you for your candid answer, and I hope BMA will do something in those lines so that we can relate the modern world through our own lens, our own heritage. I think Dr. Basu also used to say something in those lines, and I think we can strengthen this sort of movement across our own way of doing things. I think that could be very unique as India moves into its higher trajectory, so to speak.
So if I may say, these are eternal concepts. They may be 10,000 plus years and not, it's still relevant today as it was relevant earlier.
Indrapalji, I just want to respond since you mentioned BMA and us. March 5th, we have a session on management lessons from the Bhagavad Gita by an eminent lawyer from UK, Mr. Dhruv Chatralia, who has done phenomenal research in this area. I'll be happy to share details with all the colleagues later, but I was tempted to share this since you made that suggestion. I will take it in the right spirit.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
I hand over now to Mr. Vijay Kanbur, an HR professional with over 40 years of experience. He has an experience to share. Vijay, go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Mani. I didn't come to this session to talk, but after hearing Ajay Piramal ji, and he was talking about the inheritance philosophy and succession planning and all. Piramal ji really took me to 4 decades back story. Okay, I was associated with Piramal Group. I used to work for, I don't know you remember, Piramal Organic Chemicals. There used to be a company in Pune on Thane Belapur Road. It was part of your group. I'm very fortunate enough to say that I have met all 3 brothers. Ashok ji, unfortunately, is no more. Dilip ji, and I think you also had a brief meeting we used to meet in Moraji Mills. And unfortunately, the company had a labor problems, and we tried to do that. I was HR manager there to revive it, but unfortunately we could not do it. And at the end, we had to close it. So why I'm telling is, when we took the decision of closure, Piramal as a group, because you're talking about philosophy and all those things. Yes, we knew that this is a very sad part. We tried our best, but union was very adamant and they did not. But as a management, so I was dealing with, there used to be somebody called Dr. Adukia, I think you must be remembering, and all these people were, sort of this thing. So what we had a clear mandate that let what may happen, we need to see that it revives. If not, see that each and every worker in the company gets his full share of dues, even if we don't mind, give them full. And Pramod and Maniji, you will not believe that they asked me to wait till the end, the last workman gets his dues. So I was thinking that what happened to, he said, no, Vijay, you don't go, you be here, sit in our office, whether you want to come on, but see that each and every person comes and gets his dues and goes home peacefully. Because yes, it was a bad thing, but see, I think this is what he was talking about, succession planning, this, that, and all. I'm sure, I think Ajay ji will agree with me. Somewhere, I think, Ajay ji, you have inherited that from your father, because I know that I used to visit your thing and go down to the small temple we used to have there in Moraji Mills. So unfortunately, it's not there now. Yes, I suddenly started getting all those memories. Yes, I think somewhere those DNAs has got into your organization, and I'm very happy to see all the people. Your entire group is blooming. And I just suddenly, struck to me. I said, "But please give me. I want to share that." Yeah, I think somewhere. So you need the succession plan, whether it's a family and all. It's okay, fine, perfectly all right. So, but how professional management. So it's nothing wrong having family managed organization, but the importance given to the merit. So that is very important. I think what you spoke is really. I'm very happy to see you after so many years. It's more than 4 decades now. I think somewhere in 80, 81 time period. You must be young, and I was also young to very So thank you very much, buddy, and Ajay ji. All the best. So if,
Thank you so much for bringing in old memories. It's such a pleasure. Thank you, Vijay.
Yeah, I guess, Vijay, the only thing I want to say is, I am young today, but I was younger a couple of years ago. So let's not talk about growing old at all. All right. Thank you so much, Ajay ji, for those very, very honest, sincere, and straight from the heart responses. As they rightly say, learning never stops, but we'll take a pause to this learning journey this evening. We're indeed very obliged that you could spare so much time for us to set off for us this BMA KS Basu Leadership Lecture Series. And I'd like to request Mr. Ernest Fernandez, a former president of the Bombay Management Association, and a person who catalyzed this entire marriage between BMA and the Basu Memorial Trust, to make a few closing remarks and also propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, Mr. Fernandez.
Well, thank you, Professor Mani. I'd like to start by echoing what Ravi Dhingra has just said, that if Dr. Basu were present today, he would indeed be very, very proud of Mr. Ajay Piramal. Because Mr. Ajay Piramal represents the values which Dr. Basu inculcated in all his students in his life. What has become not uncommon today is the fact that batches of students of Bajaj Institute from the 70s and many of the subsequent batches, many of them are retired, they get together. Earlier, they used to get together physically in some location, and now they get together digitally. And very often they recall these stories. The story which Mr. Ajay Piramal mentioned about this discussion which Mr. Rahul Bajaj had with Dr. Basu about Harvard and so on. They recall these stories. These are the stories they remember. And that is why we are so grateful to our teachers. And that is why when we meet today, the topic very often comes down to the teachers and what they taught us and their mannerisms and all sorts of stories like that. We are so grateful to Mr. Piramal for those wonderful 7 lessons he has given us in leadership. And what struck me very much was that he related this to the pandemic and the fact that his company did so well during the pandemic, despite all the adverse factors which the pandemic posed. And I would like to tell Mr. Piramal, and be very happy to know that Bombay Management Association was faced with the same challenges. We all used to meet physically before in some meeting halls. We had our lectures. And then when this pandemic struck, many of the 7 lessons which you have articulated, following the path less traveled, we went on to a digital platform. We've had more than 80 sessions, right, of this path less traveled. We have had, in fact, lectures on many of these 7 lectures, of these 7 leadership lessons. We've had lectures on managing change, on equanimity, which you pointed out was so necessary, on trusteeship. In fact, many of the topics which you covered in these 7 lessons, we've had lectures on in these last 80 sessions, including one on ethics yesterday, which was such a wonderful session and which so much guides the Piramal philosophy. And therefore, I think that BMA has also had one of its best years, just as you, Mr. Piramal, have had one of your best years. May I just make a small point about this discussion and the story you mentioned about Mr. Rahul Bajaj and Dr. Basu, about in the 70s, the case studies were mostly American case studies, which were discussed in Indian institutes. So that is why Dr. Basu must have felt that we required to talk about Indian experiences. And therefore, at that time, since we didn't have any case studies which were Indian, he called practicing Indian managers. And that is why the generation of managers produced in those years were all hands-on managers. And Dr. Basu did the great service of giving them tremendous confidence. And therefore, the product he offered industry from the Bajaj Institute was widely accepted. And there was great pressure on getting admission into the Bajaj Institute because of the great reputation which Dr. Basu was able to create for that institute purely based on performance. Dr. Basu was truly an institution builder, as you pointed out. He not only built Bajaj Institute for 12 years, he built the Bombay Management Association. And may I just say as a small aside, that when he was the president founder, he was the president for 4 years. And therefore, his valuable time he devoted to a public cause, just as the Piramal Group is doing so much of public service in that youth program and many of the other activities that you mentioned. And therefore, the social conscience is something which is one of the keys to leadership, which you have highlighted. Thank you very much, sir. I could not think of a more fitting finale to this management week than what we have learned and shared of your wisdom today. I would also like to thank Shailesh Bhai, who always comes in and with his own words of wisdom and adds a lot of value to what we discuss in BMA. I'd like to thank Professor Mani for its great initiative and leadership during this period of the pandemic. And what is more, in this period during which BMA has organized all these lectures, it has done it complementary. It has made available all these sessions to the general public. And that, I think, has been a great contribution. And therefore, we are proud members of BMA as well. And finally, I'd like to thank Ravi Dhingra and his wife, and particularly his sister, Dr. Jubinder Dhingra, for having started this wonderful trust in aid to further and perpetuate the legacy of Dr. K.S. Basu. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sri Ernest Fernandez. We look forward to support of all our past presidents who have made this entire learning journey of BMA on the digital platform over the last 11 months so successful. Thank you, Ajay ji. Everyone has expressed their word of gratitude, but as Ernest Fernandez rightly said, this was indeed a fitting finale to our Management Day celebrations. May I request everyone to put on their videos so that we can have a group photograph of this evening spent with Mr. Ajay Piramal, deriving inspiring lessons on leadership. Please put on your cameras quickly. Our efficient secretariat, Oindrila, Supriya, and Lakshmi, along with Deepa, will do the honors. In the physical era, you needed specialist photographers, but now Atmanirbhar BMA has its own digital photographers. They'll do a very good job so that we can share the memories with you in a day or so. Please put on your cameras, put on your best smiles. And I once again acknowledge we've had so many of you present. We had close to a century today with 96 people participating, with so many past presidents, right from Shailesh Bhai, Ashok Sharma ji, Indrapal ji, Ernest Fernandez, just being with us through this event, and so many of my colleagues from the executive committee. Thank you so much for your support and encouragement. We have 3 screens to cover. Please display some digital patience. Keep smiling so that we can capture the moment together. May I just remind you, next Wednesday, we have a very interesting session by another past president of BMA, Dr. P.V. Ramana, who is going to talk about, is the MBA bubble bursting, or what should you do about the MBA? That's next Wednesday in our Wednesday Wisdom webinar. And next Friday is a very interesting session by Bosco De Mello. He's going to talk about how to navigate in this hyper complex world of paradox. He's a behavioral specialist. So let's look forward to some more lessons from him next week. Thank you, everybody. We've got a green signal that we've captured your smiles. Thank you for being with us this evening. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe, stay blessed. Thank you, Ajay ji. Namaskar.
Thank you.